A team of experts are on a quest to solve a nearly 100-year-old Bermuda Triangle mystery. The SS Cotopaxi.
No one knows where it disappeared, how it disappeared, why it disappeared. That lends itself to the Bermuda Triangle myth.
It was nothing, no remains, no bodies. It does give you, like, chills.
Many years after its sinking, can a team of archaeologists and underwater explorers find the missing ship and solve the mystery once and for all? The ocean is filled with mysteries, lost ships, and lost lives. Now, with cutting-edge technology, new clues are being uncovered, unraveling these incredible stories and revealing their sunken secrets. On the northeast side of the coast of Florida lies St Augustine. As an old city and port, its seabed is clustered with 16th and 17th century shipwrecks. But the remains of one mysterious vessel, known locally as the Bear Wreck, stands out from the rest and has been baffling experts for decades.
The Bear Wreck stands out a bit from other St. Augustine shipwrecks in a number of ways. It's been known since at least the 1980s, maybe late 1970s. It's much further offshore than most of the shipwrecks, certainly the ones that the archaeologists typically work on. It's obviously a 20th century, it could be late 19th century, steam-powered vessel.
Although it's sometimes called the Bear Wreck, that is not its true identity. The ship's real name and the reason for its sinking remain unknown to this day. It's a mystery that has captured the attention of marine biologist and underwater explorer Michael Barnett, who has been credited with discovering and identifying wrecks of numerous lost and previously unidentified ships.
It's heavily sanded in, so it looks like it's probably been down there for, probably at least 70, 80 years. What's interesting, though, is one of the boilers is upended 90 degrees from where its normal orientation, which means it was probably a catastrophic sinking event.
The fact that no information about the origins of the Bear Wreck exists intrigued Michael, who has been trying to identify it ever since his first dive over 15 years ago.
So when I was diving the Bear Wreck, having an idea of what it looks like, the general attributes, I go through my archival information I've compiled and try to get a suspect list, trying to find the top 3 vessels that may or may not fit the attributes that I see on the bottom. And in this case, one vessel in particular popped to the top of the list, and that was the Kodapaxi.
The SS Cotopaxi was an American merchant steamer that disappeared in 1925, and it's widely believed that the ship went missing not in the area of St. Augustine, but somewhere far more notorious for lost vessels. On November 29, 1925, Captain William Myers said goodbye to his wife and son and boarded the SS Cotopaxi. Carrying a cargo of 3,800 tons of coal and 32 men, the ship departed Charleston, South Carolina, en route to Havana, Cuba.
This really has been a family mystery for a long time. It was another, I'll use the term routine trip to Havana.
This was the last time he would ever see his family.
That was it. Nothing more was ever heard from the ship, and that mystery started.
Douglas Myers is Captain William Myers' grandson, and for over 90 years, the final resting place of his grandfather and his ship are still unknown.
whatever information was shared, whether it was from my father or even my grandmother, there was that connection to the Bermuda Triangle.
The Bermuda Triangle, also known as the Devil's Triangle, is a region in the western part of the North Atlantic Ocean where numerous ships and aircraft have vanished inexplicably. The region is most commonly defined to be in between Miami, Puerto Rico, and Bermuda.
There have been many disappearances associated with the Bermuda Triangle, probably none as famous as Flight 19, the USS Cyclops, and the Kodapaxi, the latter of which, the Flight 19 and Kodapaxi, were both featured in Steven Spielberg's classic iconic film, Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
I remember sitting in a movie theater, and everybody's pointing, and there's all this activity and everything. And the end frame was what they were looking at and pointing at was this ship in the middle of this desert, and it had the Kodapaxi on it. What?
In Spielberg's 1977 film, the Kodapaxi is discovered in the Gobi Desert and presumed to have been delivered there by extraterrestrial beings. But that would not be the last time Douglas would hear about his grandfather's ship.
The mystery of the Kodapaxi persists. Recently, there's been a rash of internet claims that the vessel was actually found off Cuba, intact, floating, a virtual ghost ship.
In 2015, reports started to circulate with surprising news about the vessel. Strewn across the internet were articles claiming that the ship had suddenly reappeared, 90 years later, sailing in to its original destination.
Oh, the Kodapaxi now just sailed into, like, Havana Harbor. And there was, the Cuban Navy bringing it in. Oh, interesting. Like, just rusty, but it was fully intact.
Further research into the claims proved that the reports were false, but it reignited public interest in the Bermuda Triangle and the fate of the vessel and its crew, and no one more so than Douglas Myers.
Just to know what happened, and plus the fact that he's not abducted by aliens and is somewhere, in another dimension would be also nice to know.
Although the ship's fate had been the subject of wide speculation and false reports, the fact remains that the Kodapaxi's final voyage would have taken it straight through the infamous Bermuda Triangle. Could the vessel have fallen victim to otherworldly forces? Or are there more earthly reasons for its disappearance? Since the SS Cotopaxi disappeared in 1925, it has become one of the most famous stories associated with the mystery of the Bermuda Triangle. Underwater explorer Michael Barnett is on a mission to identify a wreck off the coast of Florida that he believes is the infamous missing ship.
Based on my experience, I think there's a much more practical and realistic explanation for these disappearances. And that's why I'm setting off to help try to find and identify these vessels to help bring closure to families.
When it comes to Bermuda Triangle mysteries, finding information that has not been tainted is not easy. So Michael has contacted British historian Guy Walters to help with the digging. Lloyd's of London were the insurance brokers of the Kodapaxi. Perhaps they might hold records on the vessel in their extensive archives.
Okay, so what I've got here is the Lloyd's Missing Vessel Book, 1918 to 1929, and that's exactly what it says it is. It's a list of missing vessels, and hopefully we should be able to find it.
It is believed that the Kodapaxi vanished without warning, which means that it could have gone down anywhere along its planned route between Charleston and Havana, an impossible search area.
Here we are, so Kodapaxi of New York, 2,351 gross tons. Got here a really important box, which is titled Latest Account. And this says, sailed from Charleston for Havana on the 29th of November, 1925, and sent back wireless signals of distress on 1st of December, 1925. So this is great, because it proves that she did send out a distress signal.
This is crucial information, as the distress signals were picked up in Jacksonville, Florida, placing the ship in the area of the Bear wreck when, for some unknown reason, it ran into trouble. Armed with this new information, Michael and his diving partner Joe Citelli have traveled to St. Augustine to dive the wreck. Their mission is to locate an artifact on the wreck with the vessel's name on it. This is commonly found engraved on the ship's bell. But finding it will be no easy task. They're such rare finds that in the wreck diving community, most would be considered lucky to find just one in their lifetime. Michael and Joe can only spend 1 hour at the bottom before running out of air. And since the wreck is heavily sanded in, this operation will not be easy. They decide to employ the latest in underwater technology to aid with their dive. A cutting-edge, remotely operated vehicle, nicknamed Baxter by the team, will be sent in first to survey the wreck. It sends a live video stream back to the deck, allowing them to assess the best search areas before they enter the water.
All right, Baxter, go find us a wreck.
The ROV Baxter is now in 100 feet of water. This is the crucial time. Will Baxter be able to locate the wreck? To the relief of the crew, there is a major step forward. The ROV dive is a success, and they are able to see the wreck.
Yeah, so right there, it looks like the seafloor, but that's actually the hull plate. A little veneer of sand on it. You can see the rivet lines there.
Yeah.
Michael now has a better idea of the layout, helping him to focus his search on the areas of interest.
So we passed that, the windlass and the deck machinery, where they raise and lower the anchor. So that's where we want to look at for the bell. I think when you see what we need to go look.
Looks like we're marking real good on sonar, guys, if you guys want to get rigged up and ready to drop in.
What do you think, Quincy? Time to go dive?
The divers begin their search for the bell. If they can find it, they could potentially put an end to this century-long enigma. But the wreck is not about to give up its secrets easily. These are notoriously treacherous waters, and the divers must be vigilant at all times. Not only that, the wreck is heavily sanded in, making their job even more difficult. Most dangerous of all, time is quickly running out. Their air supply is running low, so the divers begin to make their way to the surface.
No luck on the bell. Found some nice sections of wood decking, which could have been from the wheelhouse, because a lot of times the wheelhouse up high, they have just the wood decking. I mean, I dug down, it's just heavy sand, and it's just hit or miss if you gotta find what you're looking for.
Michael is determined to prove his theory that this is the ship lost in the Bermuda Triangle. He has a lead on another diver who claims to have artifacts from the Bear wreck. Could this be the evidence Michael is looking for to tie it to the Kodapaxi? Michael Barnett has taken the first steps on his mission to find the SS Cotopaxi and to solve a nearly 100-year-old Bermuda Triangle mystery. Now, he has a new lead.
I have a local friend that's been diving this area for over 30 years, and I believe he's been on the Bear wreck numerous times, so I want to check with him to see what he might know of this wreck and if he's recovered any artifacts from his past dives.
Al Perkins is an avid diver who has been diving the wreck since the 1980s.
The Bear is probably the largest wreck in the vicinity of St Augustine. Started diving the Bear wreck on spearfishing trips around 1988.
During these dives, Al would collect loose pieces of debris as souvenirs.
The porthole, and found that in 1990. This would have been part of the telegraph system, would relay communications from the bridge to the engine room.
Most of these items could have come from any number of ships from around the world. But one unassuming piece may hold the clue to the wreck's origins.
So every time I find something like this that has a logo, I get a little excited because that creates possibilities for research and trying to figure this stuff out. The valves, we found out later on that it's Scott Valve Company, which is located up in Detroit, Michigan.
Detroit is just 12 miles away from where the SS Cotopaxi was built, in Ecorse, Michigan. Coincidence? Or another piece of evidence linking the Bear wreck to the Kodapaxi? The St Augustine Lighthouse and Maritime Museum is a nonprofit organization dedicated to researching and preserving the 500-year-long maritime history of the region. Working for its research sector, LAMP, leading maritime archaeologists Chuck Mead and Brendan Burke are experts in discovering, exploring, and identifying wrecks in the area. They too are fascinated by the Kodapaxi mystery and have agreed to help Michael out with his quest.
The Kodapaxi was built by the Great Lakes Engineering Works, GLEW. Detroit was a major center of American industry. All the ships built up there had to be of a design and size to be able to get through the Welland Canal out to the salt water, out to the Atlantic Ocean and beyond. And so they were certain classes of vessel, and this was a lake-class vessel.
She was built out of steel, weighed 2,351 tons, and had an overall length of 261 feet.
It's a particular configuration that's quite distinctive. The wheelhouse, all the superstructure, the boilers, the engine, all of that was crammed into the stern, the very back of the vessel, which leaves the entire front part of the vessel is just open cargo space with big hatches. We would expect to find the steering equipment, the rudder, that kind of thing, relatively close to the engines, relatively close to the boilers, and then we would have a long expanse of wreckage before we got to the bow. That will help us as archaeologists if we're trying to identify the Kodapaxi from its remains on the seafloor.
Chuck has agreed to accompany Michael and Joe on another dive. This time, their mission is to measure the wreck to see how the data compares with the original layout of the SS Cotopaxi.
You know, you're really looking for any features that you can identify that might
correspond to, this ship. We know that the machinery, the cabins, there's some cranes and things like that.
Well, we're almost on site, so I think it's about time to unbox the ROV here and let's get it done.
Before the dive, Chuck and Michael decide to deploy Baxter to gather images of the best areas to measure on the wreck.
Well, that worked.
Yeah, see how the whole plate just kind of dives into the sand?
Yeah. You can see the rivets, too. That's crazy.
Ooh, that looks like the steering quadrant right there. Steering quadrant is basically the linkages. So if they're turning one way or the other to the sides there, that turns the rudder. There's the boiler right there. We're back at the boiler.
Okay, that's good.
Baxter soon begins to identify the key features on the wreck. But how will they compare to the original plans of the SS Cotopaxi?
We'll suit up and see if we can get some data for you.
I like it.
All right.
Let's do it. Diver in the water.
The divers will be measuring the boilers, steering quadrant, hatches, and the overall length, which can be a little difficult given that the wreckage has deteriorated with time and some structures have shifted.
It's not like working on land. Working underwater is a whole bunch of challenges.
That's why we like it.
Yeah.
If it wasn't a challenge, we'd be doing something else.
Exactly. But so we looked around the boilers a little bit. Found a porthole backing plate, concreted down in there. So again, if we look at the general arrangement plans, I think we recall from some pictures we looked at that the accommodations in the wheelhouse actually have portholes right above the boilers.
Yeah.
If nothing else, it tells us that that's the same area on the Kodapaxi as what we're seeing on the wreck.
Michael and Chuck will head back to the lighthouse and compare the data to the original plans of the ship. They begin to analyze the data retrieved from the dive, comparing it with the original plans from Great Lakes Engineering.
Mike, let's see the data.
From the steering quadrant back here,
Okay.
forward to the engine is our first waypoint.
We'd expect it to be a little off.
There's gonna be a little bit of error.
The ship has deteriorated, things have shifted.
Yeah. So I got 34 feet running that length.
We don't actually have a good scale bar on this, but some things are drawn to scale. So this hatch here is exactly 24 feet, and I can measure half of that. So this is set for 12 feet.
Okay.
So I can take the dividers, put them essentially right where the rudder hangs, which is right where the quadrant would be, and 12 feet, 24 feet, 36 feet. And look at that. This is the engine here.
Yeah.
That puts us almost in the exact middle of the engine.
Right, and subtracting
So,
2 feet
yeah, take
back.
2 feet back.
Yeah, puts us
That's about
fairly close.
That's pretty close.
Okay.
Let's see the next measurement.
49 feet to the first
boilers.
boiler.
So 12 feet. 24, 36. Here's 48. So 49 feet is a measurement we're looking for. If we move another foot, that's really close to the after end. Everything here seems consistent with what we would expect if we had the Kodapaxi. So I think you're definitely on the right path.
We still have questions. Maybe we can find that definitive piece of evidence.
Michael is now one step closer to confirming that the bare wreck could be the SS Cotopaxi. But more proof is still needed to solve this great Bermuda Triangle mystery. And it seems that what he may have been looking for has been laying hidden in the government archives for nearly 100 years.
What this document also contains is a really vital, crucial clue as to where Cotopaxi may lie.
The Kodapaxi, long thought to be lost in the Bermuda Triangle, was built during World War I for the United States Shipping Board as a coastal merchant vessel. Being a product of the Great War, she was put together as quickly and as cheaply as possible.
So when built, SS Cotopaxi was established as a collier. She was designed to carry coal up and down the Americas, from North America to South America. She was also built with some trouble. A triple expansion steam engine located in the back of the ship left her wallowing in the seas on numerous occasions. So she was kind of fraught with some gremlins early on in her life. On one of those occasions, she actually made it aground and washed up on the beach in South America. That did a catastrophic amount of damage to the ship that today may have actually consigned the ship to the breaker. But Kodapaxi was fixed, and the value of the repairs almost equaled the value of the ship.
Despite this, she caught the attention of Clinchfield, one of the biggest coal producers in the United States at the time.
In 1919, the US Shipping Board, the USSB, starts selling off ships. And Clinchfield looks at the Cotopaxi and thinks, yeah, okay, we want that, because we need that to transport coal from Charleston to Havana, Cuba. It puts in a bid of $375,000. That's a lot of money. That's worth about $10 million today.
She was added to a fleet of vessels operated by its sister company, Clinchfield Navigation.
Clinchfield, it definitely was a big part of my family back at that time, with my great-grandfather being the port engineer down in Charleston and my grandfather being the captain of the Kodapaxi. He was the youngest ship captain in the port of Charleston, which is still to this day, I believe, one of the busier ports on the east coast of the U.S.
It was a good job, but also a difficult one. Having to spend weeks on end out on the ocean, constantly navigating the dangers and perils of the sea, was an unenviable task. This was also during a time when cargo and profit came before the lives of the seamen. Despite this, Captain William Myers had countless journeys successfully mastering the Kodapaxi. So what happened when the ship steamed through the Bermuda Triangle and sent out distress signals on December 1st?
I've been looking through lots of press cuttings about the fate of the Kodapaxi, and actually the story that unfolds is really quite disturbing. In a paper called the Thomasville Times Enterprise, Hope Abandoned for Steamer Kodapaxi, there was an exhaustive search carried out by the Coast Guard vessels from Norfolk down to Cuba. What we also have here is this pretty gut-wrenching quote from a man called Joseph G. Myers of Charleston, because it's his son, Captain William Myers, who actually commands the Kodapaxi. Says that he never expects to see his son again.
But 5 days after, the relatives of these crewmen got a glimmer of hope.
Now we've got another twist in the tale with these cuttings here. A company called the Pelaya Brothers, based in Havana, have actually sent a signal to Clinchfield reporting Cotopaxi crew safe, ship lost.
This was the miraculous news that Mrs. Myers and the relatives of the other crewmen had been waiting to hear. Their loved ones had been rescued and were now on their way back home. But were those hopes about to turn to despair?
First you had the distress calls, then you had the waiting. So it was now hanging there like, well, maybe not. You know, you didn't have anything definitive.
Just 24 hours later, doubts were raised over the accuracy of these reports. It was determined that they were just rumors. After an agonizing wait, it was confirmed to the families that the reports were false, and there was still no trace of the crew or the ship.
The Pelayo brothers say, you know, it wasn't our fault. Actually, it was the fault of the port security. The police in Havana told us that actually the crew was safe. And of course, that's terrible for the relatives to read headlines like this.
A little over a month later, the ship and her crew were officially declared missing. And as time passed, the Kodapaxi's fate would become more and more entwined with the legend of the Bermuda Triangle. But Guy Walters has uncovered a document from the National Archives of New York that reveals that some of the families of the missing crewmen had taken legal action against Clinchfield Navigation. Their claim was that the ship was unseaworthy and of a type totally unsuited for the rough conditions of the ocean. Guy hopes that hidden within this case file will be the clues about how and where the ship went down. Among the countless ships reported lost in the Bermuda Triangle over the course of hundreds of years, one of the most enduring mysteries is that of the Kodapaxi. The final resting place of this great ship and the sailors that disappeared with it is still being sought. While investigating the disappearance of the SS Cotopaxi, historian Guy Walters has uncovered a legal case which reveals shocking details about the Kodapaxi's last voyage.
After doing lots of digging, what I've unearthed are several documents from that legal case. And what I've got here is absolutely fascinating because it's a petition from Charles M. Barnett, who is president of the Clinchfield Navigation Company. Now, he argues very strongly that the Kodapaxi was seaworthy, and the reason why she was lost was simply because of this really big storm.
Historical weather records confirm that a tropical storm had hit Florida on the very day the distress signals were sent out. But a key witness in the legal case would also reveal that the Kodapaxi, a vessel that had often sailed through storms like these, had been doomed before she even left port. New evidence uncovered in the legal case points not towards the storm as the reason for her sinking, but a series of preventable measures that saw profits put before the lives of crewmen.
What we've got here is a direct examination of a man called C.N. Costa, who was an employee of Clinchfield who worked as a carpenter on board the Kodapaxi before she set sail. And now what this shows is absolutely damning to Clinchfield.
Mr. Costa held a master pilot certificate and had nearly 20 years' experience. He testified that Captain Myers had ordered him to go aboard and examine the hatch covers, and that when he did, he was shocked to find that most, if not all, were in terrible condition. Some were not bolted correctly, while others were in pieces. He began constructing new ones, but the decision was made for the ship to depart before he was finished. To make matters worse, he recalls not seeing any protective tarp designed to prevent water from coming in should the hatches fail.
That's going to be absolutely fatal to the Kodapaxi.
These are straightforward explanations for how and why the ship sank, but the fact that no remains were ever found is perhaps why it has been linked to strange phenomena throughout time. Hidden within this legal jargon, Guy has discovered perhaps the biggest clue to finding the final resting place of this ship and her crew.
What this document also contains is a really vital, crucial clue as to where Cotopaxi may lie. Because on page 2, what we have here is Barnett reporting the following. After Cotopaxi's departure on the voyage, she was last heard on or about noontime, November the 30th, 1925, when she reported by wireless her then position. And that's longitude 80 degrees, 49 minutes west, latitude 30 degrees, 7 minutes north. This could be very close to her last ever position.
For underwater explorer Michael Barnett, these coordinates offer the intriguing possibility of pinpointing the last known location of the Kodapaxi.
This is huge. We knew from newspaper articles that the vessel was last heard of off Jacksonville. Very vague. I mean, it could be north of Jacksonville, northeast. We don't really know. But here we actually have coordinates, which is just basically a mark on the map. So as I'm plotting it out here, I see the Kodapaxi here, just to the north-northeast of St. Augustine, whereas the Bear Wreck is almost due east of St. Augustine. And this is, the Kodapaxi would have been leaving Charleston, heading for Havana. That was her route there. And she's parallel to the coastline here, so that's reasonable. We're 22 miles away from the Bear Wreck, again, on the same course. So she'd be continuing on her journey down to the southeast, basically passing right over the Bear Wreck. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that.
Michael is now closer than ever to proving that the Bear Wreck is in fact the remains of the SS Cotopaxi. But is the evidence he has gathered enough to provide the family of the captain with the answers they've been seeking for so many years? Michael meets the team back at LAMP to see if they can piece together all the evidence from this Bermuda Triangle mystery and finally conclude once and for all how, why, and where the Kodapaxi sank.
So when Captain Myers and the Kodapaxi departed Charleston, right here, and were sailing past Florida, they would have watched their barometer drop and drop and drop as this low-pressure system not only approached them, but grew in intensity and danger. Right. Everybody on that ship would have known that a storm was ahead of them.
So we know Kodapaxi left Charleston, which would be up here, on the 29th of November, tail of hurricane season. On the 30th, the next day, she radioed, status update, she's right here. Meanwhile, that storm is forming, and that storm is going to engulf Kodapaxi somewhere south of here, and it's right in line with the Bear Wreck. I mean, that's right where we'd expect that ship to have gone down, given the fact that we know she couldn't have handled that storm for very long.
With the measurements from the seabed matching the original plans, the information about the hatches uncovered from the legal case, the weather reports, and finally, its last known location, the team seemed to have solved the mystery. But is it enough to identify the Bear Wreck as the Kodapaxi?
I don't think we have a single piece of evidence that could contradict the identification of the Kodapaxi, and really, I mean, my gut is definitely telling me that you've solved this mystery. That's pretty exciting. Congratulations.
Case closed?
I mean, I'd say case closed, sure.
As Michael fills out the official shipwreck identification form, there is still one person waiting to find out more. Michael has traveled to Long Island, New York, to give Douglas the closure he and his family never got, the location of his grandfather's final resting place.
You can see the Kodapaxi steaming south on the coast of Florida, and the storm ran across the coast. And
going through the evidence the team has collected, Michael explains in detail how his grandfather's ship sunk and that its resting place has now been identified as the Bear Wreck off the coast of St. Augustine.
Your explanation and all of this really, yeah, I would say that is the final resting place of the Kodapaxi.
Michael explains that despite the evidence against them, Clinchfield won the case, and the relatives of the crew never received justice for the loss of their loved ones.
Does bring a sense of closure to the mystery. Maybe I'm getting hung up on, it's something probably that should not have happened. All right, these 33 individuals, it shouldn't have happened to them and their families.
Diver that's been visiting this wreck for several decades actually found something that he wants to present to you. He came across this valve right here. He wanted me to give this to you.
Oh, wow. Heavy. Another piece of the, now solved mystery. Yeah, I put this piece next to the captain.
The discovery of the wreck of the SS Cotopaxi has put an end to almost a century of speculation, theorizing, and Bermuda Triangle conspiracies. But more importantly, it has brought closure to the relatives of the 32 crewmen who lost their lives in a tragedy at sea. Shipwreck hunters on Ohio's Lake Erie come across an unexpected blip on their radar.
Narrowed the range on the side scan. Oh my gosh, this is something.
And there really wasn't supposed to be anything right there.
Could this discovery be the oldest wreck ever found? And explain the 200-year-old riddle of two men who washed ashore.
Where did they come from? Where were they going?
There was a tragedy that had happened, so there could be anything out there.
In an area notorious for fearsome storms and a graveyard for hundreds of ships, can this team use their maritime expertise to identify and solve the puzzle of this wreck's sinking? The seas and oceans of the world are filled with mysteries, lost ships, and lost lives. Now, with cutting-edge technology, new clues are being uncovered, unraveling these incredible stories and revealing their sunken secrets. The Great Lakes of North America are one of the world's natural wonders. Superior, Huron, Michigan, Ontario, and Erie span 750 miles from east to west, wider than the state of Texas.
We're really here in the capacity that we're here today because of the Great Lakes.
The lakes hold a fifth of the entire world's freshwater supply, which at 6 quadrillion gallons is the largest on the planet. But the lakes are also the final resting place to a staggering 6,000 shipwrecks. And for decades, it's kept Lake Erie local Tom Kowalczyk coming back, underwater.
Lived here my whole life, just being around the water. The scuba diving kind of started the shipwreck stuff because shipwrecks became the interest to look at when you were scuba diving.
Tom has been researching and identifying wrecks on Lake Erie as part of Cleveland Underwater Explorers.
This lake chart is of Lake Erie, surveyed in 1817 and 1818. We were surveying northeast of Kelly's Island here for any shipwrecks that might have occurred in the area.
On a day in July 2015, Tom's boat was trailing a side-scan sonar in the continuing long-term effort to locate and identify shipwrecks in the waters of Lake Erie. Unexpectedly, a faint signal appeared on his screen.
On the side scan, there was just a tiny little abnormality on the bottom that was different than the rest. And I first looked at it and I thought, well, that's unusual, but I didn't really think it was a shipwreck because it was so small. And when I turned around and narrowed the range on the side scan and ran over it the second time, I says, oh my gosh, you know, this is something.
What at first seems to be a small anomaly has the potential to turn out to be something far more significant. And Tom is someone with the experience to know.
Obviously, it was a boat of some kind. Pointed at one end, you could see the beam work. The stern was squared off in the shape of a boat.
The question now was, which wreck was it, and how old was it?
We found the ones that are well known and well documented, but there was a lot of them that are still out there, shipwrecks that have been undiscovered. So we have to cover all the areas of the lake. The further back you go, the earlier in the time cycle you look at becomes more and more interesting. They were out there on the edges of civilization and just starting development of the country. If you're a history buff, the older it is, the more interesting it becomes.
The most important thing now was for Tom to identify it. And in a lake system containing thousands of wrecks, it would be no easy task. To help him, Tom looked to David Van Zandt, a NASA engineer and fellow founding member of CLUE.
The first thing it was, I think Tom called me, so I started doing a little research on it. And then it kind of got to the point where, okay, you know, I really want to go do this. Everybody thinks when you're going out searching for wrecks, you can just go buy a side scan and go throw it off the back of the boat and drive off and you'll find a wreck. Well, you will, maybe 10 years later if you don't know what you're doing, but you know, if something's lost, a lot of the excitement is finding it.
Tom also contacted Carrie Sowden at the National Museum of the Great Lakes. As their archaeological director, Carrie collaborates closely with local shipwreck hunters and coordinates efforts to locate and scientifically map sunken ships in Lake Erie.
Tom, I believe, emailed me a side scan sonar image and just said, there's something exciting here to go look at. And there really wasn't supposed to be anything right there. There are some really interesting shipwrecks in terms of their history. The HMS Ontario, which sank in 1780, is the oldest discovered shipwreck to date. Moving forward into the late 1800s, the Cornelia B. Windiet, which sank in Lake Huron. Everybody had assumed that it had sunk in Lake Michigan. So just this, that's more interesting to me because of the story of the finding of it. One of the great things about being a shipwreck researcher in the Great Lakes is that we are cold, fresh water, which means we get amazing preservation.
Thanks to this delay in decay and deterioration beneath the water's surface, the lake's shipwrecks have remained mostly intact, providing fascinating historical insights, dating back decades and sometimes centuries. With Carrie on board with Tom and David's plans to survey the site, the next step is for this crack team to dive the wreck together. But in Lake Erie, nothing is straightforward.
You go from no waves to 6 feet to 8 feet, in an hour's time. It gets dangerous quick.
A quest is underway to identify a mysterious vessel found by chance in Lake Erie. How did it sink? And could it explain how 2 bodies washed up on the nearby shore 200 years ago? To uncover more, Tom Kowalczyk is planning to survey the vessel with fellow divers David Van Zandt and Carrie Sowden for the National Museum of the Great Lakes. As well as being a hardy, highly experienced diver, Carrie knows very well the lake water conditions and hazardous local weather problems.
You're looking at this beautiful, gorgeous day, and you think, oh, okay, great, we're gonna go make this thing, and half a day later, you could be in the middle of a terrible storm, or it could be dead calm. When the wind blows for an extended period of time, it actually moves the whole lake. So when that happens, you can't traverse through the western basin of Lake Erie. While you might get bigger waves, heavier waves out on the ocean, in the Great Lakes, you're gonna get them, they're gonna be closer together, they're actually harder to navigate.
Lake Erie is known as being one of the most treacherous of the lakes because it's shallow. It doesn't take much for a storm to come up and you go from no waves to 6 feet to 8 feet, in an hour's time. It gets dangerous quick.
Although it's currently a clear day, Carrie has a plan in place to coordinate the team to move quickly should treacherous weather suddenly appear. But whatever the weather, teammate David will be leading the way underwater, as he knows diving an unknown wreck is always dangerous.
When you get to a wreck for the first time, you don't know whether it's got nets on it. You don't know what kind of lines are on the wreck. You've got to be meticulous on how you go there, because if you get snagged, you get trapped and couldn't get back to the surface. You may come along and you may grab a hold of something that's barely held on, and then it falls on you and traps you.
Armed with essential equipment and wearing thick wetsuits to protect against the freezing water, the team get ready to go. On entering, it soon becomes apparent how poor the conditions are. Not only is it cold, in this muddy water, clarity is also challenging. David uses the shot line to guide himself to the bottom. It's his foolproof method of return should his exit point not be clear. And when diving into the unknown, it's essential. The murky waters are making it difficult to see, and with only 3 feet of visibility, reaching the wreck is taking much longer than expected. David finally reaches the site, but will he even be able to make out the ruins? The team cannot even attempt to investigate the confined space of the wreck with this lack of clear vision. With the wreck heavily silted and visibility at almost absolute zero, the best course of action is for David to take measurements and sketch details of what he can see. findings will be assessed back on dry land. With the cold, difficulty of navigation, and a storm on the horizon, the team can do no more but return to the surface.
It was a little disconcerting because about half of the vessel is buried below the surface of the lake. So it doesn't look like a ship laying down there. It's just a bunch of sections of wood and opening and pile of lumber that you have to put back together to make sense of.
That's all we can confirm, that it was wood. It wasn't a metal shipwreck. You know, it wasn't a paddle wheel steamer. It was a sailing ship, and that was about it. And the rest of it was buried.
Now an even greater task awaits: collating the information gathered. Will Tom be able to piece together enough detail to reveal not only where this mystery wreck came from, but how long it's been there? On Lake Erie, a dive team are exploring the remains of a mystery wreck buried beneath a buildup of silt and sediment. Back on shore, Tom Kowalczyk looks over details gathered during the dive. Does he have enough to identify this mystery vessel, where it came from, and how long it's been there? The task won't be easy. The Great Lakes have a long history of shipwrecks, groundings, storms, and collisions. Lake Erie alone is the final resting place for over 1,500 wrecks.
The number of ships crossing in the exact same areas over and over and over again leads to the possibility of more and more shipwrecks. The Great Lakes are full of shipwrecks from all the way back to 1679, but the majority of ours really, you see, are post-1850, probably between 1850 and 1920. Finding the earlier ones, you know, it's a little exciting.
In the early 1800s, 1820s, traveling on land was virtually impossible because there were no roads, there weren't super highways. So the lakes basically became the superhighways.
Lake Erie was such an important step in moving west. The ability to move people and cargo easily on vessels before the railroad is what created the things that we know today. Cleveland, Chicago, Milwaukee, they're there because the Great Lakes were here to help them get started.
How is Tom going to distinguish between the schooners, freighters, steamships, and tugs that have come to rest on the lake bed to work out where this latest wreck has come from? It may be a difficult task, but it's a compelling prospect. In 2006, Tom had a hand in one of the Cleveland underwater explorer's biggest finds.
It was very exciting, especially for Tom, because right now he's got the Anthony Wayne, which is the oldest steamship on Lake Erie. And having the oldest sailing ship on Lake Erie would be another feather in his cap.
Tom discovered the wreck of the PS Anthony Wayne, which met its demise in 1850 after a boiler explosion. Tom wants to find out more about this latest wreck, in the hope it can tell us something about our past and the beginnings of our nation.
The shipwreck would be the only available physical evidence that we have to construction methods, to design, building, cargo carrying methodologies. There wasn't a catalog of how to build a ship. These were the forerunners, these were the pioneers.
An integral piece of this jigsaw is in the measurements Tom took of the wreck on the dive. Compared alongside the scan images picked up from the initial sonar, the size of the wreck is more of a head start in solving this puzzle than at first thought.
From the detailed images I took, it gave me enough information to know that it was about 50 feet long. "50 feet on Lake Erie is a very early vessel. Most of them started out about that size, and then they increased in length. So I knew it was very old just from the length.
Used to dealing with these late 19th century 200, 300 footers, and all of a sudden you're talking about a 50 footer perhaps, and it's definitely pre-1850. There's not a lot of those out there.
So using that information, I took my records and I searched on length of vessel. And I narrowed it down to 3 possibilities.
Tom's 3 possibilities are all pre-1850 and are believed to have disappeared within the search area in which Tom was trailing his side sonar.
The Fairplay, it was a 2-masted schooner. It was built in 1817 in Erie, Pennsylvania. It was 47 feet long. And it was broken from its anchor and it drifted away in the lake and it was never seen again. The Victor, it too was a 2-masted schooner. It was built in 1828, 51 feet long, and it was last seen in Detroit heading for Buffalo, which would have been the opposite ends of the lake, and somewhere in the middle of Lake Erie it disappeared.
The third possibility is the Lake Serpent. It was also a 2-mast schooner. Built in Cleveland in 1821, it was reported lost in 1829, which would make it the oldest known wreck in Lake Erie.
This article is reporting the loss of the Lake Serpent on its last voyage. We were heading back to Cleveland, and a storm came up, and there's no Coast Guard, there's no help, totally on your own. This confirms the general area of where we found the shipwreck.
Tom already has an idea of the wreck's length, but the measurements taken could match all 3 of his possibilities.
This boat's only 47 feet long. Very important that you get the exact length of the vessel. The most positive way to identify a vessel is to match the number carved into its beam with the number that went on the enrollment that would identify it. But that didn't start until the mid-1800s. This is 1820, so they didn't have to do that.
With so little to go on, how are the team going to come to any conclusion about this mystery vessel? How far can they go to confirm if the ship is the oldest wreck ever discovered in Lake Erie? A team of experienced divers are on a quest to identify a mystery vessel that could be the oldest in Lake Erie. Their initial dive was hampered by almost 0 visibility and an impending storm. But Tom Kowalczyk has matched the length of the wreck with 3 possibilities from the hundreds of ships that lay at the bottom of the lake. Tom's already found the oldest steamship wreck in Lake Erie. What can he do to pinpoint if he's found an even older wreck? In the early 1800s, boats on Lake Erie, especially schooners, were made to order. Is there a detail on Tom's wreck that would make it distinguishable from other ships?
There typically are not blueprints or drawings or any kind of records. These were built by carpenters that did them from a model or as they went along. So they might have constructed this in a way that was required because of the resources they had available to them.
Anything that may have distinguished one ship from another, for example, a carving or figure, would have been a rare and distinctive feature in the 1820s. Tom has found that at least one of the 3 long-lost ships has a key feature. The Lake Serpent is recorded as having a uniquely shaped figurehead that was said to sit proudly on its bow, representing a beast that long plagued these parts. For over 200 years, reports cite a snake-like creature, 30 to 40 feet long, stalking the shoreline. Witnesses describe a fierce, ugly, coiling thing, but nobody seems to have ever captured this lake monster.
The lake serpent was described as being a serpent's head, and it's the only document that I've ever seen that said serpent rather than scroll or figurehead. So that was pretty unique. And we figured that would be positive identification for the boat.
But with the wreck laying under 45 feet of water for almost 200 years, how well will this special figurehead have stood the test of time? There's only one way to find out. Dive the wreck again and look for it. A dive team is on a quest to identify a mystery wreck that could be the oldest shipwreck on Lake Erie. Will they find a carved figurehead that will either identify or rule out this long-buried vessel as the Lake Serpent? And will this second dive uncover any clues about how this ship met its demise? The wreck is heavily sanded in, and visibility through the silt and algae is less than a few inches. So marine archaeologist Carrie Sowden is overseeing its underwater excavation. But how much of a success will that make this dive?
You know, what's on the bottom of Lake Erie? That's very easy, it's mud. It's all silt because all the Great Lakes filter through Lake Erie, and Lake Erie is just a settling pond for it. If you've ever excavated a shipwreck, especially in zero viz once the pumps start, it's not for the faint-hearted.
The focus is going to be uncovering what remains of the wreck's figurehead and confirming if the wreck is indeed the Lake Serpent. David once again hooks his line down to the ship. A 2-inch pump will sift sediment through a hose carefully away from the wreck, making what remains easier to see.
We excavated with a water dredge that was set up on the back of the boat with a pump so we could suck the silt off of the wreck. Try to sit there and see if there was a distinguishing feature. And it turned out that there was a very interesting bowsprit on her, the head. And when we were down there excavating there, we found a stone down there, so we know it had stone cargo.
We dug across to the port side and actually kind of dug down into the cargo area just a little bit to see what we could find. We were able to find some boulders, stones, and I say stones, not stones, like stones.
Finding these rocks was not what they expected.
This is a cargo manifest of the schooner Lake Serpent on August 9th of 1821 when it went to Mackinac Island in Upper Lake Huron. This is a list of all the cargo that was aboard the vessel. 1 barrel of fish, 2 containers of butter, 4 bags of salt, 3 bags of sugar, 15 tons of plaster, and most importantly, 17 barrels of beer.
Though 8 years before the Lake Serpent disappeared, this cargo manifest suggests a very different kind of cargo to what the team have found. Should they rule out the Lake Serpent? On closer inspection, Tom finds a report that explains the Lake Serpent did disappear, with cargo that may have been instrumental in the development of Lake Erie's shoreline cities.
The last trip the Lake Serpent made was from Cleveland, and this is a report of the loss of the vessel. And it says here, on the 14th day, the schooner Lake Serpent sailed from the islands with a cargo of stone. We found out that they were using this stone to build a breakwater in the Cleveland area so as to keep the harbor entrance clear of the sandbars so they could get in and out.
Cleveland in the 1820s was one of any number of cities along the lakeshore. If you had lakeshore and you had a river, you had a city. And I think a lot of the raw materials that you see moving, like stone, are headed to help grow these cities like Cleveland.
The Lake Serpent had begun carrying cargo that was integral to the development of the shoreline. Kelly's Island is known for its limestone quarry, so it made sense for the Lake Serpent to have been collecting its cargo there. But there was a problem. The boulders discovered on the wreck were not from a quarry.
Limestone is thin, flat, usually 2 or 3 inches thick, or block-shaped stone that is cut out of the ground. These were round boulders.
They're definitely not quarried stone. It's definitely pre-quarry time and from the Lake Erie Islands.
If the stone had not been collected from a quarry, then what had the ship been doing around the islands? It was a question that would need Tom to do some further digging. But will he find enough answers to finally solve the mystery of this long-forgotten vessel? A team of shipwreck hunters, including Tom Kowalczyk, is looking to identify a mystery wreck half buried in sand and silt under the waters of Lake Erie. They have discovered their wreck was carrying a cargo of stone when it sank, but the stone found is throwing the ship's mission and identification into confusion. Though the wreck has a consignment of limestone from the Lake Erie Islands, why is the stone not quarried? Tom thinks he has cracked this conundrum and can explain what the ship was doing at the islands.
Being a boater and being on Lake Erie and knowing how quickly storms can develop and come up and how violent the lake can get, I don't think I would want to put my boat right up on the shore in an exposed area where there was no protection from any kind of weather that might possibly come up. So maybe the islands do make sense, that they had an area that was somewhat protected and is conducive to having all kinds of rock available to them that would be safer than it would be just to go locally around Cleveland and try and gather up the stone. So they didn't go to Kelly's Island to go to the quarry. There are multiple quarries in the area. I found out that the first quarry on Kelly's Island wasn't started until 1834. That was 5 years after this boat sank.
At the time of the ship's sinking, the pioneers were blazing a trail westwards across America. Movement across the Great Lakes was in flux, and the Lake Serpent's crew also recognized the need for a better life.
The people, where did they come from? Where were they going? Why were they on the ship?
The schooner switched from carrying perishable goods to carrying stone, which would be to the benefit of many who were involved in the advancement of the lakeshore cities of that time. But despite their best efforts to work as safely as they could with their cargo of stone, the crew met their demise. The ship may have been taken down by a violent storm that suddenly whipped up. With its heavy cargo, it may not have had the full power to battle hazardous waves. In October 1829, the bodies of Captain Ezra Wright and his brother Robert were recovered in Lorain County, just west of Cleveland.
Unfortunately, their bodies were found washed up on the beach on the shore weeks later. That confirmed, obviously, to the people that there was a tragedy that had happened, and these people all lost their lives, you know, just trying to better themselves and do things, you know, in that time frame.
The team have put together their findings and come up with the same answer. They are sure the men who drowned 200 years ago were crew on this shipwreck. They have identified the size of the vessel. They have found stone cargo, dating the wreck's age to pre-1834, before the quarries were opened. Everything points toward it being the Lake Serpent. But there is one last piece of evidence still missing: the figurehead of the Serpent.
This is from the second dive when we were doing our excavations. It was the only chance I had to bring the camera gear down and get any kind of decent images.
This is the deciding piece of evidence needed to identify the wreck and confirm that they have discovered the oldest shipwreck in Lake Erie. But over time, the wreck has been impacted not only by nature, but by man.
It's going to have battled storms, other vessels coming by, all kinds of things. Lots of fishing. We found fishing nets and fishing weights, actually very old fishing nets and weights. So it has definitely seen some degradation. It is not a whole and complete shipwreck hull. The sands of Lake Erie shift with all that movement of sand. It's really going to start to wear down on the details of what this figurehead may have had, the carved details.
Finding a carved figurehead among the wreckage seems a tall order. But as David studies the photographs, something catches his eye.
What we're seeing on here is the actual head of the shipwreck that we found. And you can see it's perfectly carved, or purposely carved, and it resembles a lake serpent in its shape and form. And these other images around the periphery to this image right here are iconic images that were back in time of how sailors depicted what a lake serpent would look like.
But you have to remember that in the 1820s, those images might have been significantly different. If you compare this to some of those images from that time frame, it is really not so much different than the serpents that they depicted.
A lot of shipwreck identifications, are probably at that 99% level. You're never going to be 100%.
There is no doubt that on this image here, there are areas that have been shaped and carved that have physically been altered into trying to make it look like something. And the more I look at it, the more it looks like a serpent. It is the oldest shipwreck that exists in Lake Erie that you can actually go and touch and feel and measure and document information. So this is the first one. This is the oldest shipwreck.
The team are satisfied that they have discovered the Lake Serpent, a ship that went missing almost 200 years ago, and from which 2 bodies were recovered. In its final resting place, it can now be regarded as the only physical example of Lake Erie shipbuilding from the 1820s, and a large missing piece in the canon of Ohio history. Beneath the waves of a lagoon in the South Pacific are more than 60 shipwrecks.
Bombs, bullets, beach mines, all sorts of other highly explosive products on board. It's a miracle it wasn't vaporized during the attack.
Most have been well documented, but one underwater explorer now believes that he has evidence of an unknown wreck which may rewrite the history of what happened here.
Came across something that was not known to be in that area. It's a bit of a mystery because we don't have records of any ship being there.
What will they discover? And will it reveal the lost secrets of what has become known as the Japanese Ghost Fleet?
Something blew up around here, I think.
The seas and oceans of the world are filled with mysteries. Lost ships and lost lives. Now with cutting-edge technology, new clues are being uncovered, unraveling these incredible stories and revealing their sunken secrets. More than 1,200 miles from the nearest continental landmass lies Micronesia. It's a country comprised of 4 island states: Kozrai, Pohnpei, Yap, and Shuk. The atoll of Shuk is home to stunning beaches, crystal clear waters, and one of the most incredible underwater graveyards in the world. After World War I, Japan assumed control of Micronesia. They had intended to run the islands peacefully, but soon realized that Shuk, known then by its former name, Truk, could be of vital military importance.
truck is the absolutely perfect location for a naval base. The Japanese saw it there, slap bang in the middle of the Pacific, and realized that's fantastic strategically, but better still, because it's a natural coral atoll, it's the perfect anchorage point for a massive fleet. It's got natural protection. But also what the Japanese do is to augment that with their own fortifications.
But in 1944 came an attack by U.S. forces on the island stronghold. More than 50 Japanese ships were sunk, many of which have since been explored and identified. In 2002, Professor Bill Jeffrey of the University of Guam was part of a project to record all of those known wrecks.
When I did my research, I documented all the wrecks in the area. We were just sort of turning around and coming back towards another site, looking around with the side-scan sonar, and then we came across something that was not known to be in that area. It was obviously something not natural. It was obviously a man-made feature.
Now Bill thinks he's found a mysterious wreck that all other explorers have missed.
It's a bit of a mystery because we don't have records of any ship being there.
As he dug deeper, Bill realized that there were many ships that are still listed as missing in action more than 70 years after the war.
In my research in the National Archives in Washington and San Francisco, I did come across a list of about 130 ships, smaller size ships, up to a couple of thousand tons, that are lost.
Bill is now planning to return to the lagoon to do what no other explorer could: identify this mysterious sonar image.
If we can dive, if we can sort of record what's there, we get some dimensions of it, get some identification through other things, we might be able to marry it up to a particular ship on this list.
But diving an unknown wreck in the lagoon is not something to be taken lightly. The radon truck saw the Americans make a devastating two-day attack. And many of the Japanese ships that were sunk went down carrying explosive cargo. Ships like the San Francisco Maru.
The San Francisco Maru is known as the $1 million wreck. And there's a good reason for that.
It's called the $1 million wreck because it has that or more worth of munitions and supplies on board.
She had managed to survive the first day of the attack, but on day 2, she was hit by 6 500-pound bombs, sending her to the bottom, where her deadly cargo remains to this day.
Seeing all this munitions on board, it's highly explosive material. It's a miracle this ship wasn't vaporized during the Allied attack.
It's got cordite. It's got thousands of hemispherical beach mines.
And actually, if you dive today onto the forward deck, you can still see 3 Mitsubishi Type 95 Hargo tanks. They're right there.
Why was this remote atoll singled out for such a large-scale attack? The answer lies in the years leading up to World War II, when Shuk was governed by the Japanese. Gradvin Isaac grew up surrounded by the ruins of Japanese fortifications and listening to the tales of the local elders.
The Japanese educate the people of Shuk, and they hired them to work for the Japanese. And the Japanese really help the local people. They feed them, they give them what they want, and they pay them.
Turkish people that were there in those early days, they said it wasn't too bad. They had all sorts of facilities there, ice cream parlours, a cinema. Before the war started, some people thought that life wasn't too bad, even though it was under quite stringent Japanese control.
Perhaps the unique perspective of the islanders can help solve the mystery of the strange sonar image. Identifying the wreck won't be easy. So many are littered here, and they all stem from one world-changing event. On December 7th, 1941, Japan launched a surprise attack on a U.S. naval base in Hawaii.
People talk about turning points of the Second World War. Believe you me, Pearl Harbor was the turning point.
Truk was now a battleground which would eventually see the sinking of the Japanese fleet. Can the strange anomaly in the image paint a more vivid picture of those bloody events? In the remote Pacific island of Truk, underwater explorer Bill Jeffrey is hoping to identify a mysterious sonar image. The origins of the story are rooted in the notorious attack on Pearl Harbor.
Since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan on Sunday, December 7, 1941, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
As the war progressed, life for the islanders changed. The Japanese became cruel occupiers.
The people of Truk, they work with the Japanese. The Japanese treat them like slaves. They force them to work without get paid.
Truk was gradually turning into one of the most important Japanese bases in the Pacific.
Truk is not only this fantastic anchorage point for the Japanese Fourth Fleet, it's also a major place where you can ship supplies and goods in the fight against the Allies. It's got 4 airstrips and even a seaplane base. This is a serious, serious fortification.
11 years after his initial discovery, Bill returns to Shuk Lagoon, his mission to finally identify the mysterious sonar anomaly. This time, he's joined by professional diver Jim Pinson. As Bill and Jim discuss the plan for tomorrow's dive, they stand on the same shoreline that witnessed the sinking of more than 50 Japanese ships. Their wrecks are scattered around the island. During the Battle of the Pacific, Truk had become a real concern to America. Reconnaissance missions were showing the full extent of the fortifications on the atoll. But there was something else. Truk was also harboring Japan's largest top-secret weapon. Even before the war began, Japan had embarked on an ultra-secret project to create a weapon designed to counter the American fleet's greater numbers.
Two B-24s from the Air Assault Command came in on reconnaissance. It was a very cloudy day. And there were destroyers and all kinds of military ships. But they did see the Yamato, and they couldn't believe they'd ever seen anything that big. It was astonishing.
Yamato was not just the heaviest and most powerful ship ever built. She also represents this huge symbol. She represents the Japanese Navy's might, her technological power, her ability to absolutely trounce any opposition. This is a really attractive target for the Americans.
Bill and Jim know exactly where the wreck of the Yamato lies, but their interests lie further out in the lagoon. The simple fact was that the threat to U.S. operations in the Pacific could no longer be ignored. It would eventually lead to the attack that sunk the Japanese ships. Among them was the mystery wreck which Bill and Jim are now determined to identify. The attack was given the code name Operation Hailstone.
You have this unit called Force 58 under the American Admiral Mitcher, and he is going to use this to attack Truk. This is a massive operation.
Bill and Jim's first dive will take them to the location that was at the heart of that attack, and is still littered with the weapons and bombs of that bloody day. On the island of Truk in the Pacific, explorer Bill Jeffrey and diver Jim Pinson are on a mission to identify strange wreckage from one of the greatest U.S. naval attacks in the war. The lagoon is littered with wrecks from Operation Hailstone. What clues and evidence can the team find? Although the reasons are shrouded in secrecy, in February, the Japanese came to believe that a U.S. attack was imminent and evacuated their main fighting ships from Truk. They left behind many working ships, cargo vessels, and merchant freighters. It was these that would soon face Operation Hailstone. U.S. Task Force 58, with its destroyers, aircraft carriers, cruisers, submarines, and warplanes, were now headed towards its target. Just before daybreak on February 16, 1944, the order was given to attack. Bill Jeffrey, who is on Truk today preparing to search for strange wreckage from the attack, takes up the story.
They all would have had their mission about what to bomb. You know, the 19 islands, and many have military facilities. They wanted to come here and bomb Truk, whether it was 100 Navy ships or 10 Navy ships. They just wanted to wipe it out. This is a payback to Pearl Harbor.
This is the dramatic background to Bill and Jim's quest to identify the wreckage in Truk Lagoon. Bill has learned that there was one wreck of a ship sunk during Operation Hailstone that was only discovered in the 1980s. Mysteriously, neither that ship nor its cargo turned out to be Japanese. So, what was it?
The Hoki Maru was originally called the Hauraki, and in fact, she wasn't originally a Japanese ship. She was actually built by the British and then actually owned by a New Zealand shipping company. And the Japanese actually captured her when she was sailing from Fremantle to Colombo.
Bill's research shows that the vessel was taken to Yokohama, where it was modified and was renamed the Hoki Maru. The Hoki arrived at Truk with its cargo of supplies just weeks before Operation Hailstone. She was sunk on the first day of the attack. Bill Jeffrey has discovered that the wreck lies in 170 feet of water, just east of what is now Dublon Island, and that previous dives have revealed that much of its cargo remains intact. But most intriguing of all is what was on board: 2 John Deere tractors, both designed and manufactured in the USA. But for Bill and Jim, the great prize is to find what that sonar blip actually is. On the island of Truk, a team of experts is on a mission to discover the identity of mysterious wreckage from a destroyed Japanese fleet. As they piece together the clues, they've found that Truk was once the possible target for a very different and far more deadly kind of attack. During a meeting held on May 5th, 1943, members of the Military Policy Committee discussed a top-secret weapons program known as the Manhattan Project. A key part of that was Truk Lagoon.
Long before the Americans dropped the A-bomb on both Hiroshima and Nagasaki, it was actually the atoll of Truk was considered the perfect place to test this new deadly weapon. And actually, if you have a look at this top-secret memo here, you can see the Americans talking about how the best point of use would be on a Japanese fleet concentration in the harbor of Truk. So what the Americans wanted to do was to see what effect the atom bomb would have on ships.
The plan to drop an atomic bomb on Truk never materialized, but the U.S. later carried out a controlled test at another South Pacific island group. That was Bikini Atoll. It gave a chilling glimpse of what lay in store.
Operation Hailstone may have been this incredibly violent all-out assault on Truk, but actually as of nothing compared to what would have happened had this memo been followed and Truk was nuked.
Since the first wrecks were discovered here in the 1960s, the continued interest in diving the area prompted Gradvin's father, Kimiu, to open up Shook's very first dive resort, the Blue Lagoon. In the years that followed, many new wrecks were found and identified. This makes Bill's sonar image even more baffling. If so many wrecks in the lagoon have been discovered, how has it managed to remain a secret for so long? How has it been missed? And what part does it play in the Truk Lagoon story? There's only one way to find the answers. After exploring the wreck site, Bill and Jim now know they need to dive it. So it's back to the Blue Lagoon to suit up. The sonar hit was 230 feet below the surface. Jim will need to limit his time at the bottom to allow him to recompress as he resurfaces, avoiding nitrogen buildup in his blood, which will give him the bends.
We're going to spend about 30 minutes on the bottom, but we might spend up to 2 hours coming all the way back up.
But at those depths, the bends are not the only danger.
Narcosis it's not a possibility, it's a fact. You're going to get narcosis at the depth we're going. Deeper you go, the more narcosis, just like drinking more alcohol. Problem, your body has a fight or flight reflex. That makes a narcotic effect even more. So the narcosis could be not a problem until something went wrong. Then it's a very big problem.
A little bit of concern for anything that goes on like that, so a little bit more than the average diving.
Jim will also have to be especially vigilant, diving any new and uncharted wreck site in the lagoon, as many of the ships were carrying explosive cargoes, much of which are still live.
The locals, when I first came here 42 years ago, they would take mines and use it to dynamite fish. It's really dangerous to go into these underwater historic items, and you just have to pay attention.
And as with any unfamiliar wreck, diving can present a whole host of potential risks.
You don't enter into a place when you're underwater, you can look in and you'll see light coming out from somewhere, and that's your out. The real danger is some silting up.
Silting up, or silt-outs, happen when fine sediment is kicked up during a wreck dive. It can cause complete loss of visibility and orientation, which can have fatal consequences.
I've been involved in recovering 3 dead bodies, divers that died while diving. One person, he got into a very narrow place. It silted up, and when we found him, his tank was dry, his regulator was still in his mouth, and he just didn't make it.
With final checks complete and their equipment loaded onto the boat, it's time to identify the sonar image.
This is Tonawis, the main island during Japanese time, and we're heading around the northwestern part of Tonawis and going out probably in a northeasterly direction for about 1 kilometre.
On the way to the mystery wreck, Bill passes over another stark reminder of why the U.S. saw the assault on Truk as revenge and retribution. Japanese submarine I-169 had been an important part of the attack on Pearl Harbor. It managed to get into the harbor and launch 5 mini-subs that went on to destroy 2 U.S. battleships.
She's got this enormously impressive military track record. And not only that, she also survives Operation Hailstone. So, you know, she's an incredibly lucky sub. But of course, that luck is going to change.
When Bill and Jim arrive at the wreck site, whatever that strange blip is will be directly below them, and they'll soon find out. In Truk Lagoon, maritime expert Bill Jeffrey and diver Bill Pinson are on a mission to identify a mystery sonar image, which could be an unidentified wreck from Operation Hailstone in 1944. Bill wonders if it could be connected to a Japanese submarine, and a very dramatic story. After Operation Hailstone, those Japanese vessels that had survived the attack were on constant high alert. And on April 4th, 1944, submarine I-169 received the message all aboard had been fearing. B-24 bombers had been spotted in the sky, triggering an air raid warning. To avoid the bombers, I-169 made an emergency dive. But in their panic, the crew had left the ventilation valves open. Water flooded into the control room. The 1,400-ton submarine, with her crew of 80, were now trapped at the bottom of the lagoon, with limited air and little chance of rescue. But suddenly, there was a glimmer of hope.
Rescue divers were sent down to the sunken submarine and signaled to the trapped crew by banging on the hull.
Hama otamare.
After confirming that there were still survivors, a rescue mission began to bring the trapped crew members to the surface.
These cables start winching this submarine up.
But as the submarine broke the surface, with the crew just moments away from salvation, disaster struck.
The added weight of all the flooded compartments snapped the cables.
Divers go back, bang on the side of the hull, and this time there is no reply.
Bill and Jim finally arrive at the wreck coordinates, close to the island of Fonamu.
We're about 50 meters straight up.
As Jim is only planning to spend 20 minutes at the bottom, they deploy a remotely operated underwater vehicle to locate the wreck. The ROV makes its 260 feet descent to the ocean floor. Reaching the bottom, it begins the hunt.
Come forward a bit. Seem to be in about the spot for the ship, I think, or whatever it is.
Using a grid system, the ROV scours one section of the area shown on the sonar. Combing the ocean floor, it looks for any sign of the mysterious anomaly picked up on Bill's scan.
What depth are we at?
65.
Haven't found it yet. We might have to call on Jim yet.
With the light fading, Jim will have to dive the other grid section and try to find it himself.
Well, it's all up to you now.
Okay, no problem.
No pressure. No pressure.
No pressure.
Jim dives, and on deck, all Bill can do is wait. As the light fades, so do Bill's chances of finding anything.
Yeah, I think he would have signaled to us in some way that we'd he'd found something.
Jim had only planned to spend 20 minutes at the bottom before sending up a float to let the crew know that he's beginning to resurface.
So 24 minutes. Oh, it's getting close to dark, isn't it?
Over 40 minutes have passed, and still no sign of Jim. Finally, Jim signals to let the crew know all is well.
It came up a long way off the wreck, so if he'd found something, I think he would have come up a lot closer. Sometimes you win them and sometimes you don't.
They'll have to wait for him to finish his recompression to find out if he's made any discoveries.
I mean, obviously, you guys want to know, did I find it?
Yeah.
Didn't see anything in the first, like, 15, 18 minutes. And it's only after about 20 minutes in the dive that is when I started seeing things. I found an anchor in at least 3 parts. And I don't know how you break an anchor.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, this was broken. I found what looked to be part of the hull plating or something that was probably 12 feet across, blown through the middle, like an explosion. It ripped the metal open. So something blew up around here, I think.
Bill and Jim seem to have found evidence of a sinking in an area where no ships are known to have gone down. Could the dive team have discovered an as-yet unknown victim of Operation Hailstone? What will a review of Jim's new wreck footage reveal? A dive team exploring the waters of Truck Lagoon has made a fascinating discovery: the possible unknown wreck of a Japanese ship sunk in the U.S. attack, codenamed Operation Hailstone. The day after the dive, Bill Jeffrey and Jim Pinson meet to review the footage. Did the mysterious anomaly found on Bill's sonar scan match what Jim discovered on the ocean floor?
So you can see, you know, there's obviously a feature here with some straight lines. Measured it, it's about 60 meters long. It doesn't look like what you've seen, does it?
Nothing had a curve like that. What I saw in the water on the dive was not that. 100% not that. There might be some more stuff out there. History's still a mystery.
We probably have 2 different sites.
Solved one question by adding another question, basically.
We've got 2 questions now. We had 1 question, now we've got 2 questions.
We're making progress.
So, if the wreckage found in the lagoon was not what was seen on the scan, what was it, and where did it come from?
The first thing that I ran into, so I wanted to see what it was exactly, because I wanted to see if it was something metal, and of course it was. This is an anchor, but it's not an anchor, it's part of an anchor. And I've never ever seen a broken anchor before.
That's a good find, well done.
This was what got me the most excited. It looked like just some twisted metal, and that's actually what it is. This is heavy-duty metal, thick gauge, and it is just curled up all over. Looks like it was blown out this way from an explosion.
How big? You know,
I did a couple arm spans, and so it looked like it was just, I just kind of checked, and it looked like it was 2 arm spans. So I would say 10 to 12 feet. I think it's all one piece. Like, you can't see most of it because it's buried in the sand.
What you found looks like more like debris.
Yeah, it's evidence of something massive force, massive force. Because that metal's, you know, that metal's curled over. It's not just blown like this a little bit, it's curled over.
Seemed to be in the direction of where Ikoku was.
The Ikoku Maru was an armed merchant cruiser of the Imperial Japanese Navy, sunk during Operation Hailstone. Since its discovery over 40 years ago, a question mark has remained over the mysterious whereabouts of its missing bow section. If what Bill and Jim have discovered really is part of the missing bow, why has it been found so far away from the main wreckage?
They found parts of the bow, little bitty parts of the bow up to 200 feet away.
Yeah.
But, we're quite a bit further away.
Using the GPS coordinates, Bill has calculated that the debris found on the dive was over 650 yards from the main wreck. Just how would it have been possible for large chunks of metal to travel that kind of distance? The answer may be supplied by an eyewitness who watched from the shore. On the first day of Operation Hailstone, instead of heading for cover, Kimiyu made his way to the beach and watched the devastation unfold.
And he just stayed there on the shore watching. He just was so much in shock, especially because he had worked on those ships.
He saw ships running with smoke. He said that he saw the Ikoku.
Kimiyu watched as the Ikoku was struck by 4 bombs. Crippled but still afloat, she was attacked again, this time with a torpedo. She took a direct hit in cargo hold number 1, which was full of ammunition and high explosives.
That's when he saw it disappear in a mushroom cloud that lasted 1 minute and the ship was gone.
The blast was so great that it had even destroyed the U.S. Avenger aircraft which had launched the torpedo, killing all 3 of its crew members.
This is more of a debris field that was lifted up and moved over by an explosion.
Yeah, big, that sort of jagged metal you saw.
Jagged metal, that was,
anchor.
I mean, I've seen that on shipwrecks still attached.
Yep.
I've never seen it just laying out. So that could have been the piece, piece of the hull plating that was just blown apart.
The clues suggest that what Jim and Bill have found is part of a ship destroyed by a huge explosion. It was possibly the Ikoku Maru. Even today, determined divers, ongoing research, and new technology can shed new light on events that took place here more than 70 years ago. And the lagoon that saw such destruction continues to give up its secrets.